which is what's being promoted these days. And I can't tell you how many people we've talked to who've gotten in trouble using protein powders. Burnout, autoimmune disease, even running into cancer. Vitamin A is critical for proper growth and the prevention of birth defects. Now, the latest area of scientific research is stem cell research. And it's a fascinating area of research. Stem cells are undifferentiated cells. The fetus starts out as stem cells, and then it gets a signal to form a heart cell or a lung cell or, a liver cell. These organs don't replenish themselves by dividing. They get new cells from stem cells, both in the growing child and in the adult. Adults have stem cells all over their bodies. What is it that tells the stem cell to become a heart cell or a liver cell or a lung cell? It's vitamin A. Vitamin A is the concert master of the growing fetus, and it's what keeps us cancer-free and allows the right kind of cell division in the body. So this is why you need to build up your vitamin A stores before you get pregnant, because the heart's the first organ to form. By the time you know you're pregnant, that heart has already formed. And if you didn't have enough vitamin A to form the heart properly, you may have a miscarriage or you may have a baby with a problem in the heart. It's becoming very, very common these days. The entire endocrine system is dependent on vitamin A. The thyroid gland, you need vitamin A to make thyroid hormones. You need vitamin A to make immune hormones, T cells. All the stress hormones and sex hormones require vitamin A. Vitamin A is needed for brain function, planning, and task completion. The ability to start a task, a project, and complete it is dependent on vitamin A. Interesting. And vitamin A is needed for healthy eyes, skin, and bones. We think of bones, vitamin D for bones, but you need vitamin A for healthy bones. This is a chart showing all of the hormones made out of cholesterol. If I stand here, is that louder? It's okay now? All of the, that is louder. All of the sex hormones are made out of cholesterol, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. And then over here we have the adrenal cortex hormones, which regulate blood sugar, blood pressure, mineral metabolism. They help us deal with stress. They help us heal, help with inflammation. They're all made of cholesterol, and they all require vitamin A. Every arrow here is an enzymatic conversion that requires vitamin A. We have had dramatic cures of people who have hormonal problems, very long and debilitating menstrual periods, endometriosis, fibroid tumors, by getting them on very high doses of cod liver oil. So the body can actually has the signals that it needs to make these hormones. Same with stress, same with healing, and vitamin A is really critical. The trans fats, which we'll talk about this afternoon, inhibit all of these conversions. So by going from animal fats that have vitamin A in them to the trans fats, we've created this sort of double jeopardy. And no wonder everyone needs prednisone today to heal, because that's the artificial cortisol that the bodies can't make anymore. This was an interesting study done in Texas in the 1940s. They took normal pigs, mated them, and when the sows were pregnant, they removed vitamin A from the diet, and all the piglets were born blind with a petrified optic nerve. They took the blind piglets and mated them. A few of the sows were able to get pregnant. They returned vitamin A to the diet of the pregnant sows, and then all the babies were born with normal sight, even though the mothers were blind, or the parents were blind. So here is something we consider a genetic defect, being born blind, that's turned on and off with vitamin A. Now, vitamin A stores are rapidly depleted by stress. Now, nobody here is ever under any stress, though, right? We don't have to worry about that one. When you have good vitamin A stores, stress is actually exhilarating. You'd be bored without stress. But if you are lacking in vitamin A, every little thing is stressful because you can't make stress hormones when you're lacking vitamin A. This is why people who go through very stressful situations like the death of a loved one or a divorce or financial hardship tend to have more tendency to diseases like cancer and heart disease because the stress depletes them of vitamin A. Too much protein, we talked about that. Cold weather is very depleting. In Scandinavia, they kept the little box outside the door with the cod liver oil in it, and they took the cod liver oil when they went outside in the cold. Fever and illness, very depleting of vitamin A, and it's very important for children to have fevers. One of the theories about why we have so much cancer today is we're not allowing children to have fevers. Fevers really kickstart the immune system. They're very important. But when a child has a fever, you want to make sure you give them some egg yolks, some cod liver oil, a little liver pate or something, so they keep their vitamin A stores high so the fever doesn't deplete them, because if you get too depleted in a fever, you may end up blind or with a seizure. Physical exertion depletes vitamin A, and exposure to toxins. So pesticides, chemicals, these are very depleting of vitamin A. That's why they're toxic. We have numerous papers showing that vitamin A protects against dioxins. And this is why cod liver oil is so important if you are being exposed to these kinds of chemicals. Fish eaters in Japan, there's a lot of dioxins in commercial fish, do not have high levels of dioxins in the blood, meaning that there must be protective factors in their diet, and that's almost certainly vitamin A. But the key point here is that dioxins have always been in our environment. What's the number one source of dioxins? Smoke. Think of our Gaelic people living in those smoke-filled cottages. They were exposed to dioxins every day. So the body must have a mechanism to deal with dioxins. This is not something new to human beings. In fact, we probably have far less exposure than we used to because everyone was exposed to smoke. And so the body's mechanism for dealing with dioxins is vitamin A. Doesn't mean you should deliberately expose yourself to dioxins, but in any of these situations with environmental poisons, it's always a balance between avoiding overexposure and making sure you're protected nutritionally. Okay, moving on to vitamin D. There's a lot of myths about vitamin D, and the first one is that to get adequate vitamin D, all you need to do is go outside for 10 minutes every day, expose your hands and face, and you'll get all the vitamin D you need. And I was actually listening to the USDA webinars on the dietary guidelines, and there was a fire drill, and they had to go out and stand outside, and this was, I don't know, in March sometime, and they were all laughing about how they got their vitamin D by standing outside, and they should know better, because we know now that we only get vitamin D when the sun lights directly overhead, and in this part of the world, that occurs in July and August at midday. And if you go out and sunbathe in July and August at midday, you'll make a lot of vitamin D, but that's not very practical for most of us. And in any event, most of the year, we have to get our vitamin D from food. Even in the tropics, where people had overhead sunlight, they still got most of their vitamin D from food. And that brings us to the second vitamin D myth, that you can't get vitamin D from food. The people selling vitamin D supplements are telling us you can't get vitamin D from food. But you can get vitamin D from food. There's a lot of foods that contain vitamin D. The fish liver oils, fish eggs. We tested caviar and found 17,000 international units of vitamin D in 1 tablespoon of caviar. That's why caviar makes you feel so good. Shellfish are an excellent source. Insects, butterfat and egg yolks from animals in sunlight, organ meats, the fat of birds and pigs, and blood is a very good source of vitamin D. And many cultures use blood in their food, in their sausage, and their various dishes that they make. Vitamin D, like vitamin A, has many roles in the body. We associate with healthy bones, but it's necessary for proper growth. Mineral metabolism, not just healthy bones, but healthy muscles. If you have good vitamin D status, plenty of vitamin D in your diet, you don't have to work out to have good muscle tone. It just happens naturally. Reproduction, healthy skin. You need vitamin D for insulin production. There was a very interesting study carried out in Scandinavia where they put one group of babies on cod liver oil for the first year of life, and another group of babies did not get cod liver oil. There was no other difference. There was no dietary guidelines. The diets were just the same. And then they followed these children into adulthood, and the children who got cod liver oil the first year of life, there were no cases of diabetes going into adulthood, 0. Those who had not had the cod liver oil developed diabetes at the normal rate of the population. The immune system and the nervous system depend on vitamin D. Cell function, feel-good chemicals. This is a fascinating new area of research. We've learned that inside our bodies we make what are called endorphins. These are feel-good chemicals that are identical to the drugs. We make cannabinoids that are identical to what's in marijuana. We make opiates that are identical to what's in opium. But we make them in just the right amounts, and we have receptors for these chemicals. And it's vitamin D that's needed for the production and the receptors for these chemicals. So vitamin D is really critical for just feeling good, for preventing depression. And vitamin D is associated with longevity. People with good vitamin D status tend to live a long time. We warn people about the synthetic vitamin D2. It's made from vegetarian sources, and it can have the opposite effect to the animal source, D3, causing softening of the hard tissues and hardening of the soft tissues. And this is what's the D2 is what's used in these artificial beverages based on soy, oats, rice, and almond. This is one reason to avoid these things. Well, what about toxicity? We hear a lot about these vitamins being toxic. In fact, I got a call the other day. It was one of our board members who's had a doctor tell her he's seeing a lot of people who've been taking huge amounts of vitamin D, and this is vitamin D3, the supposedly good type, seeing a lot of inflammation. People taking D3 all by itself. And then we know from certain studies carried out in Scandinavia that if you have a lot of vitamin A without the vitamin D, you get osteoporosis. So what we found, we did a huge literature search on this, and what we found is that these vitamins need to be taken together. They're synergistic. If you have too much vitamin D, you get symptoms of vitamin A toxicity or deficiency. If you have too much vitamin A, you get symptoms of vitamin D deficiency. So you need to take these together. What we found is that if you have adequate vitamin D, I'm about to sneeze. Don't want to sneeze into the microphone. If you have adequate vitamin D, about 1,000 units a day, vitamin A is not toxic, even in the millions of units. And the ideal ratio, there's a lot of work going on now about the ideal ratio of A to D. And it should be at least 1 to 10. In other words, for every 10 A, you should have 1 of D. And now they're even thinking it maybe should be 5 to 1, 5 A to 1 D. But what you don't want is to, for example, to take cod liver oil that has lots of vitamin A and almost no vitamin D. Or to eat a lot of liver full of vitamin A without having foods that are rich in vitamin D as well. These are modern Africans, beautiful bone structure. I'm from Washington, D.C. We have a lot of Africans come from Africa. You can always tell when they're born in Africa because they have such beautiful teeth, beautiful bone structure. And I like to ask them what they ate when they were growing up, what they usually say, oh, my mother made beautiful peanut soup, or we ate fufu, which is fermented cassava. I said, no, what kind of animal foods did you eat? Well, we didn't have much meat. We were really poor. We ate frogs and we ate insects. Shrimp paste is a typical African food. It's it's a condiment, sort of like ketchup. It's made from